Hey everyone, we're diving into Tropical Storm Helene today. And, this one's looking like it could be a real humdinger. We're seeing some pretty concerning forecasts about this thing potentially becoming a major hurricane. So we're here to unpack all of that for you.
Absolutely. We've been poring over the latest data, and the biggest takeaway, honestly, it's the speed of this thing. Helene could go from a tropical storm to, well, a major hurricane in just a couple of days, less than 48 hours, potentially.
Wow. Less than 48 hours. So as of this morning, Tuesday morning, Helene is still technically a tropical storm, right? It's out there in the Atlantic, kind of hanging out a couple hundred miles east-southeast of Cozumel, Mexico.
That's right. But here's the thing. It's on a beeline for Florida's Gulf Coast, expected to make landfall Thursday night.
Thursday night. Okay. And this is where it gets a little hairy because they're saying, and I'm quoting directly from the reports here, that this could be a large, dangerous hurricane. Those are the words they're using. Large and dangerous.
Yeah, and they don't throw those words around lightly. When they say large hurricane, it means that even if you're not right in the center of the storm's path, you're going to feel the effects. We're talking a much wider area impacted by storm surge, those powerful winds, and the heavy rainfall. All of it stretching way further out from the
So
center.
it's not just about where it makes landfall, but it's the size of this thing. That's a
Yeah,
big part of the concern, right?
exactly. A bigger hurricane equals a bigger area hit by those, really dangerous hurricane force winds. And we're talking potentially hurricane conditions from the Big Bend region all the way up through the Nature Coast.
Wow. Okay. But even if you're further inland or, say, down in South Florida, it's not like you could just tune this out.
Nope. Those outer bands of the hurricane, they can pack a serious punch. And Helene's looking pretty massive, so.
Okay, so bigger storm, bigger impact. That makes sense.
Yeah.
But what is it about this hurricane that's making it so strong? Is this normal for this time of year, or is there something else going on?
So there's one factor that's got everyone particularly concerned, and that's the heat content in the Gulf of Mexico right now.
Yeah.
It is unusually high.
Unusually high, okay.
Yeah. Think of the Gulf like a giant bathtub, right? And someone's gone and cranked up the water heater to the max. And that warm water, basically it's like rocket fuel for hurricanes.
Oh, no, not what you want, right?
Ah.
Giving a hurricane extra fuel.
Exactly. The warmer the water, the faster these storms can power up, what we call intensify. So Helene is basically, guzzling down an energy drink as we speak, and that's what's got the experts worried about this rapid intensification.
That's a little unnerving. Okay, so warm water equals a stronger hurricane. Got it. But I also saw some stuff about wind shear in the reports, which always kind of throws me off. Can you remind us quickly, what is wind shear and why does it matter for Helene?
Of course. So imagine you're trying to, I don't know, build a tower of blocks in a wind tunnel. Pretty tough, right? That's kind of what wind shear does to a hurricane. Basically, it's a change in wind speed and direction over a really short distance. It can disrupt the hurricane's structure, make it harder for it to stay organized.
So it can actually weaken the storm? Okay, well, that's good news, right?
It can. And here's the tricky part with Helene. The forecast models are having a hard time figuring out how much wind shear Helene's going to run into and when.
Okay, so it's unpredictable.
Exactly. If it hits early enough, yeah, it could really weaken the storm. But if it's late to the party, well, we could be looking at a much stronger hurricane making landfall.
Okay, so the wind shear is a bit of a wild card. Could fizzle Helene out or make it way more intense?
Precisely. It all comes down to the timing. And unfortunately, right now, that's a big unknown.
So we've got a rapidly intensifying storm, a huge wind field, and it could be juiced up on warm Gulf water. And now we've got this unpredictable wind shear to factor in. Definitely not your average summer storm.
No, not at all. And with all that in mind, let's talk about what this could mean for those in Helene's path. Specifically, let's start with Florida's Gulf Coast, because the storm surge predictions alone are raising some major red flags.
Yeah, the storm surge is what really makes me nervous about these hurricanes. So if Helene does become this major hurricane, what does that mean for the folks on the Gulf Coast?
Well, the Big Bend area, Appalachia Bay, and the Nature Coast, they're all looking at the highest risk right now from the surge. We could be talking, upwards of 10 feet of water above ground in some places, especially if it hits at high tide.
10 feet. That's like most of a two-story house.
Right. It's no joke. And, some of these areas are still recovering from Idalia, too.
No, exactly. Like Cedar Key, I was reading that they could see even worse flooding this time around.
Yeah, and that's why you have to really look at the specifics of where you are, the lay of the land, so to speak. What's the coastline look like? Is your area high elevation, low elevation? It all makes a difference with storm surge. If you're anywhere near the coast listening to this, now's the time to figure out your evacuation zone. Don't wait.
Seriously, if you're in one of those zones, get that evacuation plan nailed down now. Don't wait for the order to come through, and then you're stuck in traffic with everyone else trying to get out of there.
Absolutely. And hey, while we're talking about prep, now's the time to check that hurricane kit too. Make sure it's stocked up. Water, food, batteries, flashlights, first aid kit, copy of important documents, all that good stuff. You got pets. Don't forget about them.
Yeah, your furry friends need supplies too.
And remember, not all shelters accept pets, so you gotta have a plan for them in advance.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, and switching gears a bit here, the article also talked about how far inland Helene's impact could reach. I mean, we could see storm surge as far south as the Keys.
Wow. Okay. So even if you're not right on the coast, you're still not in the clear. What does that mean for someone further inland, though? You might be thinking, oh, this doesn't apply to me.
Well, it means wind. That's the big thing. Helene is expected to have this massive, massive wind field, so even if you're miles from the coast, you could still experience hurricane-force winds. And we're not talking a breezy day here. This is the kind of wind that can rip trees out of the ground, knock power lines down, send debris flying everywhere. Dangerous stuff.
And when you combine those winds with the rainfall they're predicting, I mean, things could get really dangerous really fast, even if you're not worried about that surge.
Oh, absolutely. Some areas are looking at least 4 inches of rain as far north as Kentucky. But closer to the storm's path, so the Florida Panhandle, the southern Appalachians, you could see up to a foot of rain. And that's not puddles, folks. That's the kind of rain that causes flash floods, even miles from the coast.
A foot of rain. And so much of the ground is already saturated, it wouldn't take much to cause some serious flooding.
You're right, it doesn't take much at all. And those strong winds, you add those into the mix and it gets even riskier because when the ground's wet, it's easier for trees to come down.
That's right, they're not as sturdy. So even if you're not right in line for that storm surge, the wind and the rain from Helene are still nothing to sneeze at. This is serious stuff.
So it sounds like we're moving from the what of Helene to the so what now. Knowing all of this, what can people do right now to get ready?
That is the million-dollar question. And it really boils down to this information and action. This is the lot to take in, right? So first and foremost, I want to remind you, knowledge is power. The more you understand about what could happen, the better you're able to make those smart decisions for you, your family, your loved ones.
I like that. Knowledge is power. So what are some concrete steps that our listeners can take right now to feel, I don't know, more prepared, less anxious about all of this?
Yeah, it's a lot to process. I think if I was listening, I'd be like, okay, this is intense. What do I actually do about it?
Totally get it. But taking action, it can actually help with that overwhelmed feeling. And the good news is there are some really practical things you can do to get ahead of this thing. First things first, remember those watches and warnings we talked about? The National Hurricane Center, that's your best friend right now.
Right. Don't just scroll through social media and hope for the best. Go straight to the source. Get the most accurate info.
Exactly. Check their website, their app, whatever works for you. But check it regularly. And don't just check once and think you're good. Things change fast with hurricanes.
Got it. Stay informed. Check in often.
Mhm.
Okay, what about your actual house? Where do you even begin with hurricane prep?
So think back to those 3 big threats we've been talking about: storm surge, wind, and rain. If you're in an evacuation zone, obviously that plan is priority number 1. Make sure you know where you're going and how you're getting there. But beyond that, prepping your home is all about minimizing damage, right?
Right. Okay, so for wind, that means bringing in anything that could turn into a projectile.
Right.
Patio furniture, grills, plants, all that stuff.
You got it. If you don't want to be dodging it in hurricane-force winds, bring it inside. Secure it really well. And while you're at it, take a look around your property. Anything else that could become a problem in strong winds. Loose branches, dead trees. Now's the time to deal with that stuff.
That's a good point. So let's say you're not in an evacuation zone, but you're still staring down some serious wind and rain. What should people be thinking about then?
Well, you got to think about flooding. That heavy rain, it can cause a lot of problems, even if you're not in a flood zone. So first things first, check your gutters. Make sure they're clear, no debris. Let that water flow.
Oh, that's such a good reminder. Clogged gutters plus a foot of rain equals disaster.
Exactly. If you have a sump pump, make sure that's working properly too. And it might not be a bad idea to think about some sandbags around your foundation, especially if you've had flooding issues in the past. Better safe than sorry, right?
I love these tips.
Mm.
I think what's really striking me is how much taking action helps with that feeling of helplessness. Hurricanes are scary, but doing these things, it puts you back in the driver's seat a bit,
100%. That feeling of being prepared, of having a plan, it can honestly make a world of difference in your anxiety levels and how you handle everything.
for sure. So for everyone listening, if you're feeling that sense of overwhelm, just remember, knowledge is power. And action, honestly, it's the antidote to fear. We've thrown a lot of information at you today, but we really want you to come away from this feeling informed, feeling prepared, ready to handle whatever Helene throws our way.
We're here to help you cut through the noise, get to what matters, stay safe out there, stay informed, and we'll catch you back here next time for another deep dive.